And we're back. So first, living on purpose means revealing who we really are. There's a second thing that we find as we consider what it means to live on purpose as we look at the text. Number 2, revealing God's plan. I want you to notice what it says in Genesis chapter 45. And now we get to the real reason why God did what he did in the lives of Joseph and his brothers. I want you to notice it with me as we look at chapter 45 and verse 5. It says this. Joseph is speaking after he told them that it's me, Joseph, your brother whom you sold into Egypt. And then he says, verse 5, and now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there has not been plowing and reaping. Verse 7. But God has sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by this great deliverance. So it was time. And as Joseph was opening up to his brothers, couldn't you have just visualized the scene there? I mean, they were just standing there with their mouths open, awed, frightened, unsure what they were hearing, but it was obvious it was Joseph. He was speaking to them in their own language. Life for those who are members of God's chosen family, members of the family of God, is all about knowing and believing God's revelation. If you claim to be a child of God, the revelation of God's plan, the revealing of God's plan is important to you. Because when God's plan is revealed and believed, the hearts and lives of God's people will be changed. The end result is always peace, confidence in life, and joy in living the life that God has given. And notice what takes place. Joseph reveals to his brothers who they are, and he begins to share with them that which they were not aware of. I mean, remember, according to the book of Genesis, these were members of the family of Jacob. They were of the 12 sons who would one day become the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes who would be used of God for many centuries. It was God's plan for his chosen people. There are 3 things that we notice here about the revelation of God's plan that will impact us. Here's the first thing, A. What the Lord had prepared in advance will make a difference. What the Lord had prepared in advance will make a difference. He prepares for what the future brings. He prepares us for what the future brings. When Joseph shared what he did with his brothers, it finally became a reality that I'm sure they had difficult understanding and realizing. It's kind of like you and I today. I mean, what is it that God is trying to do in your life? Remember, if you're a child of God today, if you've accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, God has chosen you not simply to occupy space, not simply to just be there. God has chosen you so that you may make a difference, so that you may be a part of his wonderful plan. And I don't know what God's plan is for your life. The brothers didn't have any idea what the plan was for their life. But as Joseph began to explain to them, here's what God has done and the reason that God did it, it began to make some sense because of what the Lord had prepared for them in advance. There's a second thing that we find. What the Lord does to protect his people. He brings about deliverance. I know these are difficult days. No question about it. We've never lived in a day that we're experiencing today with the pandemic. And I know there's controversy even with that. There are those who firmly believe that this is a health crisis, but there are this difficult understanding or even believing all of what we're being told on the news and with the media. And there are those who believe it's really not that big of a deal. The truth is, none of us really know. What we do know is that there are people that are affected. There are people that are dying. This is not just some fluke. It's not just happening in the United States. It's happening all over the world. And so the one thing that we do know is that our God is in control. And as we trust him, something incredibly wonderful happens. We find his deliverance and we find peace by turning to him. There's a third thing that we notice here as we consider what it means to understand when God's plan is being revealed. See, that is this: what the Lord provides for his purpose and for his plan for us. What the Lord provides for his purpose and plan for us. He provides for our needs. I don't know about you, but even though I don't know how this is all going to work. Apparently, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be paying for all of the money that the federal government is sending us, and to help those who are unemployed, to help those to get by, help small businesses, even though not all businesses have been receiving their benefits. There's a lot of money that has come to people, and it's all because of what God is allowing, and it's for God providing for our needs. I don't know about you, but my needs are being well taken care of. And it isn't because I deserve it, it's because we serve a holy God who takes care of our needs. Here's a principle as we consider this. Living on purpose is about revealing God's plan so that God's people will have a confidence of the Lord's presence and leading. Living on purpose is about revealing God's plan so that God's people will have a confidence of the Lord's presence and leading. So, let me ask you a question. Have you submitted to God your life today in lieu of what's happening? I mean, it's a pretty scary day and age in which we live. But as we submit our lives to him, something wonderful happens. We discover his presence as he reveals to us his plan for your life, which was happening in the lives of Joseph and his brothers. And that ends part 2 of 3. I'll see you in part 3.